Hey, welcome back to the shop. Thanks for stopping by. This week's project, we are going to take this piece of birch burl and try and make a fruit bowl with a natural edge around it. And now the bowl will only be a part of the center, and this will just be wings out the outside. This is the burl. If you watched the video where I made the plaque with the resin inlay, this is the cap off of that burl. So I took a slab off the face of this that I used for that plaque. And it's a really nice piece of wood. It's got some wormholes in it, but it's got some really nice curl, some nice figure, and pretty uniform thickness on the bottom in terms of where the bowl is going to be itself. So it's not bad. So going to mount this to a faceplate and turn a flat spot and a mortise in the bottom. Where it's actually going to flatten off for a mortise is about here, and that is not 4 inches. That is probably only maybe 3. So I've got 2-inch number 14 screws, wood screws that I'm going to use, and I think they're only going to come through about 1.75 inches. Yeah, actually just over 1.5 inches. So it should be okay. So I found what I think is the center, or what I want to be the center. And again, in a bowl like this, where one wing is longer out and the other really is irrelevant, it's going to be a kind of a misshapen thing anyhow. So I'm going to mount this with this faceplate, drew up the bottom a little bit, put the tailstock up so that it's good and safe while I make the basic shape of it. I'm going to pre-drill these. I'm just going to set the depth of my drill so that I'm not longer than the screw. So that basically puts the drill all the way in the chuck. And I'm going to go down to that depth. Lots of questions on different videos and different live streams that I've been on and watched, and new returners are asking about how big a screws you should use. And I like when I can to use a screw that fills the faceplate hole. So you can see this has a taper on it. Hopefully you can see that. And you can see that the faceplate's tapered as well. And so when this goes in, it's just nice and tight. And so that gives me the least amount of movement that I'm possible to get. There. So we'll get this on the lathe and we'll take a look at it before we start spinning it. Alright, so we get everything mounted up here on the lathe now. So you can see there's some bark inclusions that are going to be in this. Some of these are going to turn out, and some of them I think probably will not all get turned out. But it's going to be pretty close actually. So the plan will be, I guess I'll show you this. This outside edge natural is what I want, but here's where it got scuffed when it was harvested, and so that I do not want in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the wings of the bowl down to get below this, and I'm going to gradually bring them up until I get to this round actual solid piece in the center where I'm going to make the outer rim of the bowl. So the actual hollowed out part of the bowl. So I'm going to bring this down. You'll see there's a saw cut here, but that's all going to get turned out. And so we're just going to ease this edge down until we get below here, and then this actually here, wherever this works all the way around the piece, is going to be the natural lip of the bowl. So there are going to be probably some of these left in it. I'm just going to bring it in till I'm got a clean line all the way around, and then I'll work from the inside after I get the outside finished out. But this will be what I base the size of the bowl on here. Once I get a clean line around here, and I know that I'm good. So we'll get the flat on the bottom so we can bring the tailstock up with no point in it, just for safety, and work at shaping this thing up. Okay, so I've got a flat spot here now, good enough for the tailstock. So this just has to be in place, doesn't have to be crazy hard up against it. So you can see I've moved the steady rest to the other side of the piece, and I've got the lathe running in reverse now, and I'm just working over the bit of the lathe. With the wing on there, it makes it very difficult to get a good contour, a good cut on that to profile it the way that I want, and this is much easier. And it also cuts easier going this direction. All right, so I'm going to mark a mortise and turn a mortise in the bottom of this. Got enough here that I'm probably going to have a 1/2 inch on the bottom, clear of the screws after I get my mortise in. It's going to need to be a fairly significant mortise because it's going to be a lot of torque on that chuck when I get turning out here. Now, I can't just finish this bottom and then flip it and do the top because I want to get this undercut. And in order to do that, I need to true the face of it first. So what's going to happen is I'm going to turn the mortise, turn it around, leave the faceplate in place, find out where this cleans up. So this piece right here that I want to get rid of, I'm going to find out where that cleans up and see what I have for thickness. And then once I get that rough, well, actually probably a little better than rough, arc to the top of the wings of the bowl, then I'm going to flip it back around on the faceplate again, and I'm going to undercut this to the level that I need it to be cut to. The jaws of my chuck have a dovetail, and this diamond point tool I have ground to that angle, and I've got the lathe in reverse again. It's just easier to reach to make this cut in reverse. Now that the mortise and the foot of the bowl are turned, I'm going to sand them up. And I start at 180 grit and I sand all the way through to 800, which is the grit that I used on the entire bowl. Alright, so I've got the bottom finished and almost finished sanded. Got a couple more grits to go through, but before I finish it completely off, and I may have access to this again, as I said, this is going to go back and forth a couple times to do it right. I'm just going to put a little design in the bottom. Alright, so I've got this turned around now in the 4-jaw chuck, and I'm just going to put the tailstock in. It'll sit in that faceplate just fine for a little bit of extra insurance. Alright, so I've got a good flat surface there now. This is about the size of the bowl that'll be here. Actually, it's a little smaller. So now I'm just going to work on bringing this around so that it's a nice tapered down, just so I get clear of that blemish that I've shown you earlier. And you have to be very careful doing this because you don't want to chip out this edge. It's a nice crisp edge here now, and I want to keep it that way. You can see there's a lot of tear out, so I got to be very careful in how I finish this last few cuts. So I'm going to sharpen up my gouge, get my tool rest in nice and tight, and make a couple really nice, as clean as I can make passes here at this thing at the end. So I'm going to oil this grain because it is full of wormholes and it's soft. I'm deep enough now that if I had a nice clean cut on that, I would be happy. The other thing that I need to do is speed up my lathe now, because the faster it's turning, the cleaner it's going to cut. You see the grain in that is really, really nice. The other thing that you have to be careful of when you're doing this is that you do not ride the bevel. You get as close to riding the bevel as you can without actually riding the bevel. Because when you ride the bevel and you get to air, this is what can happen. You go right through. That's a super sharp line now. I'm really pleased with that. The only thing that's a little dicey right around these wormholes right here, but it's not tear out, it's just the wormholes. That's just a ton better than it was. So now I know where my top's going to be. This is it. This is going to be the size of the bowl on the top. It's going to have a little bit of bark right there possibly, and I may actually just take that in just a hair more here. But this is good. Now I can sand this without anything else being done to it. I can sand it. The steadier you can hold on this cut, the less sanding you have to do, because you really can't sand this while it's spinning. It's just out there too far. Alright, so I am going to take this in just a tiny bit more. Pretty well lines up with the bottom of the bowl that we've already cut. Alright, now I'm going to flip it back around. I'm going to cut this wing down to the thickness that I want, which is too thick now. It's like 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to knock that down to probably 3/8. I'm not going to go silly small with it, but I'm not going to leave it that clunky either. Although that doesn't look bad like that for a piece like this. But I think I will make it thinner, and I'll bring you back when I have it turned around. Lots of wormholes in this. I'm going to blow the sawdust out of these wormholes when I'm done. I'm going to leave them. I'm going to leave them empty. I think that just adds to the whole look of this one. Alright, so I'm going to sand this up and I'll bring it back when I'm going to flip it around. Alright, so I've got this all sanded up, but before I turn it around, I just want to show you how I did it, because I'm sure someone will ask. So I power sanded the wings and I power sanded the bowl. I went back over this transition cut right here and hand sanded it. Well, there's some dust in there now, but it's nice and smooth. But I started with 180 grit, and all I did was I worked my way through the grits on the wings, and then I did the bowl. But if you do turn a bowl like this, if you can leave yourself a solid ring, and this isn't too bad of a gap, it's close enough that it doesn't affect anything, but if you can leave yourself a solid ring between the bowl and the wing, so that you can put your power sander in after you've sanded the wings, if you can get your power sander in here and be able to blend that with the power sander, because it's nice and round, it's not bouncing you around, that makes your job a lot easier. I can see that it's going to be a time-consuming process to get the sawdust out of these little wormholes, but I think it's going to look really cool when it's finished. So I'm going to spin it around now, and we'll hollow out the inside. Okay, so I marked the outside of where the wall on the bottom side of the bowl is. It comes right out to this inclusion right here, so it's pretty easy to find. Sort of marked the inner wall thickness. It's probably going to be a little thinner than that, but not much. What I'm going to try before I hollow that out, because I want a nice crisp transition line going down in, is I'm going to try the 6-inch sander, because I think that it is big enough that it's not going to, I think it's going to be able to stay on most of it. And I got some 180 and 220, so I won't be able to get it finished sanded, but I'll be able to get a lot of it. All right, so that went really well. I only had 180 and 220 grit in 6-inch discs, but I was able to put a 5-inch disc on the center without any problem and finish it up. So it turned out really good, and that made a real short work of that job, so yay. Now I am going to remark where I want my entrances to be here. Alright, I've had to move the tailstock out of the way because I can't get the right angle of cut to go down parallel to the outside from with that there. I just can't get my chisel around good enough. One thing you gotta be really careful of when you're making this entrance cut is that you get a good hole in your chisel so that it doesn't catch and drag across the lip of your bowl, because that would that's a do-over if you do that. Alright, now we're good to sand. Everything's sanded up now, so I'm going to spend the next little while with an air hose blowing all the dust out of all these holes in the front and the back, and then I'll bring it back and we'll put some Danish oil finish on. I'm supposed to put this on a very thick coat to start, and then let it soak in, and then give it another coat in about a half an hour. Alright, so I'm going to let this soak in, and I'll put some stills up at the end so you can see how it all turned out. And thanks so much for watching. If you stuck with it, I really appreciate it. Thanks again to everyone who subscribed to the channel. I really do appreciate that. And if you like what you saw, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you could leave a thumbs up and a comment, that really helps the channel. And if you didn't like what you saw, you can leave a thumbs down and let me know why. And that'll help me improve. And don't forget, if you are a subscriber, or if you do subscribe, you can go to the video from last week, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. And there is a contest for 750 subscribers, and we're going to give away a bird's eye maple bowl that I made in that video. And so if you want in on that, make sure that you subscribe and leave a comment on that video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.